This is the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. We're at Ag Day at the Capitol, our one day every single year where hundreds of members descend upon the State House in Columbus to talk one-on-one with lawmakers about all the policies that are important. Bill Patterson is president of Ohio Farm Bureau. And Mr. Patterson, this is also the day that we unveil our priority issues for the year. And as you mentioned to the group earlier, before they made their way across the street to the State House, the government is coming at us really fast. A lot of things happening, not just in D.C., but here in Ohio as well, that we really have to keep an eye on. And it seems like every single day there's something new to watch out for.
It really is. I think about the Nationwide commercial with MC Hammer years ago, where it's life comes at you fast. We can't even get a foothold of understanding what comes at us on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's the beauty about what Ohio Farm Bureau and American Farm Bureau does, because you got American and Ohio Farm Bureau that are watching our back every single day so we can farm and make sure that those things that matter, and that we can, where we need to fight and we need to stand, we're going to stand. And then I think, at some point, the priority issues, that's what sort of sets the tone and where we're going to be. And that's where we're going to be able to make sure that we're making an impact on the front side, on the positive side, and, being aggressive and on the offensive of where agriculture needs to be.
Seems like we never lack challenges in agriculture, and every single year the list kind of gets longer as far as those priority issues are concerned. One of the things that's always on top of the list is creating a strong business climate. What are we talking about when we talk about policy that helps our members continue to do business in the way they're used to?
Yeah, one of the things, as I was looking through the priority list, and I got to the second item, and that was a farm bill. And the farm bill is going to provide certainty. And I thought, my gosh, certainty is going to be in every single one of these issues, because really that's what we're looking for, is certainty. We need to understand what the playing field is. We need to know going into a season that we know there's fluctuations, we know there's things that happen in this world, but there's a lot of things that are controllable that we don't seem to be controlling today. And number one is a farm bill. I mean, we simply need a farm bill. It's derelict of duty for the people in Congress to not be providing some clarity. And you look back at the $32 million in funding that was received in December, and that's great. It was necessary, certainly, and it was appreciated, but it all could have been taken care of if we had an on-time farm bill. Taxes, same thing. We don't need to have tax cliffs every time. Make some of these tax cuts, or wherever the taxes need to go, let's make these things permanent going forward, so that we're not looking at every single administration to understand where we're going to be. Are we going to be able to pass on the farm? All the different things that we need to do, the regulations, just some consistency. And so as we look at this administration and we look at the flood of things that happen every single day, certainly there's a lot of things that we can support. But every time there's might be 3 steps forward, it's 1 step back, because then all of a sudden someone drops a bomb from an area that we were never talking of, that all of a sudden becomes part of the conversation. And so we're trying to figure our foot in there.
I loved what you said this morning. He talked about all the acronyms that we're dealing with. You've got MAHA, and you've got HHS, and you even included RFK. And when we talk about things like that, we're talking about regulation, right? Yeah. And I've said for years that Ohio Farm Bureau is not opposed to regulations. They just have to make sense, and they have to be science-based. Yeah. What are some of the things we're working on that front?
Yeah, science-based and data-driven. The other thing that we talked about this morning is water quality. We understand that there's a spot for ag. There's a spot for everybody in the state to share in the water quality issue, and agriculture is not going to shy away. So agriculture came right out and said, let's do research. Let's do research. We do not want to be driven like some of the areas across the country that you've seen, where they've driven things that have been not productive. So let's make sure agriculture is leading the way to find productive solutions. And let's go into these offices. I mean, today you got 250 people. We don't want to go in there and talk about our problems for the entirety of the day. We want to talk about our solutions. And I think that that's where we're going to ultimately get this, and be able to work out and negotiate with them what makes sense for not only agriculture, but the entire state of Ohio.
And anything we talk about today really can't happen without budget. And the state budget will be worked on until the middle of the year, and then we'll find out exactly what it looks like. But efficiency is what we're looking for in the state budget.
Yeah, I think from the state all the way up to the national budget, I think that's what we're looking. This budget, while I haven't had a time to look overly deep into, this budget has some things in there that are different than budgets we've seen previously. And so as you think about the governor's last 2 years, he's trying to leave a legacy. He's trying to put the state of Ohio on better footing moving forward so that we have sort of long-term sustainable ability to operate and grow and thrive in Ohio. So I very much appreciate a lot of the things that he's doing. However, it requires a lot of work looking in there, understanding what these impacts are, and particularly making sure that agriculture and rural Ohio has been considered as we're looking at all these different areas that are falling in the budget.
As we talk, we just found out that we lost 200,000 acres of farmland in the last year alone, 1,800 farms in total. Farmland preservation, really those numbers bring that effort into focus as we talk with lawmakers today.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to be looking out for, we need to make sure that farming is a place that people want to be, because this country today does not have a national food security policy in place. We have a makeshift, and that allows for things such as subsidies for solar, to consume farmland without any direct consequence as to what might happen if we continue to lose land. And I'm not saying the 200,000 is green energy. I want to be very clear. There is a series of things, and we're asking for that information, and we need that information to understand where this farmland is going. But there's only 13.5 million acres of farmland in the state of Ohio. If we lose 200,000 a year, that's 70 years and we're gone. And we're done. And there's nothing that's abating the loss of the farmland today. 1,800 farms, that's 5 farms a day we're losing in the state of Ohio. And so how do we make sure that we aren't incentivizing away our food security? Everybody in the country agrees that food security is a key piece to a national security policy, yet nobody values how we're going to produce the food in the future. And so we've got to have that as part of the conversation, particularly on the national perspective of things.
So far we've talked about a healthy economy. We've talked about healthy regulations, talked about a healthy budget. None of this makes any difference if we don't have a healthy community. Talk about some of the things we're talking about, including the new health plans initiative that we're taking on at Ohio Farm Bureau that could benefit a lot of rural Ohio.
Yeah, we started talking about a health plan. We have a health benefits plan, which is great, and it's a tool in the toolbox, and a lot of people are being affected of utilizing the health benefits plan. But we were finding there was a part of the population, a significant part of the population, that was being left out, and that's a health plan sort of for everybody, for individual care. So we talked to our friends from Tennessee Farm Bureau. They've had this plan going for, I think, 30 years. Very effective, affordable, available, and good quality coverage, which, as you talk to our farmers around the state, what's the issues? What are the issues that are causing you not to grow? Well, I would love it if my spouse didn't have to work at the school or the garage or wherever it is on a regular basis because of healthcare. Okay, well, we better figure that out. Or, by the way, we don't have healthcare, and because I don't work for a company that has healthcare. And so we've got to have that as a key part. We have to address that part of it. And we do think that, again, this isn't necessarily for everybody, but it's for a lot of people that are in the situation that concerns us and help prohibit agriculture from growing. So we're looking there. The other big piece on the healthcare is, well, let me be clear. Let me go back. We're not looking there. We're very happy. We're very proud that Senator Manchester and Representative Peterson have brought legislation forward, Senate Bill 100, House Bill 99, that is going to be able to implement this. And we've asked our members to go out and tell their story, tell how the lack of affordable healthcare, the lack of healthcare is affecting them directly. And I sat in one of the meetings this morning with the state rep from Ashtabula, and one of the members made just a very clear case of how he was not able to have healthcare for his spouse because of the situation we're in, and how this program would have solved that issue. And it's just so clear. And there's hundreds and hundreds of stories being told today about that healthcare. Now, back to the other piece, and that is mental health. And I think one of the areas, and Ty, you've been on the leading edge, and Nathan Brown have been on the leading edge of fighting the mental health, the ability to make sure that we're talking about mental health. I think that's where it starts. I think it's where you continue to talk about it, talk about issues going on in your farm. And we have to continue to be aware that not just in agriculture, but rural Ohio as a whole. And people are not alone. And I think, again, that's something that you're discovering and having those conversations. But to make sure that Farm Bureau, because we're representing rural Ohio, we're representing our members, Farm Bureau has been on the leading edge of some of the best programs across the state to address check your engine, programs like that just make sure someone's checking in with, someone knows what's going on to make sure that everybody's doing okay.
One thing that's always on our priority list is engagement, and that grassroots level engagement that we're so proud of at Ohio Farm Bureau. And Mr. Patterson today is a prime example of what Ohio Farm Bureau is all about, but we're trying to get more members to get engaged at the local level.
Yeah, there's nothing more important what Ohio Farm Bureau does than advocacy. And Jack Irvin, our VP of Public Policy, will say the reason he gets in the door, I mean, he's a nice dressed fellow, but he gets in the door because of members and because of relationships that the members make. And then the fact, it was really neat. Again, I was in the representative, and the one fella was the vet for that representative, and the other person has grown up for the last 30 years of their life with this representative. Those are relationships that are so strong because they build trust. And so when you have that relationship, you have 65,000 members that have relationships with the 132 legislature members that are there. You can't beat that. That builds trust, that builds integrity. They know when Ohio Farm Bureau comes to them that they're going to be coming with good, solid, quality solutions for all of Ohio and rural Ohio. So that's so important. So then how do you, where's that, weaponize? I don't want to use that word. How do you prepare those members who want to be engaged? How do you prepare them with the information that they need, which again is generally telling their story? How do these things that we're talking about affect them? How do not having a farm bill? We're going to DC next month. How does not having a farm bill affect you? How does the cuts to the Relief Act, the IRA, how do those cuts affect people? Who's getting calls that they have equip funding that they're expecting because they're putting in things and they don't know where it's at? Tell that story. That's a story that people want to know, how they're being affected. Then we can find solutions as long as everybody's on the same page that we're actually being affected day to day with these issues.
You can find out all about our priority issues online right now at ohiofarmbureau.org. Bill Patterson is president of Ohio Farm Bureau. Always great to catch up. Thank you.
Thanks, Ty.
Hey, this is Matt, Phil, and Libby, hosts of Ag Credit Set It, your go-to podcast for insights on farm finance and maximizing your return on investment.
Tune in to new episodes of Ag Credit Set It twice a month as we talk to industry leaders, financial experts, and farmers who share their experiences and perspective.
Listen in your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and be sure to subscribe to Ag Credit Set It so you never miss an episode. We'll talk to you soon.
Sometimes out here, you have to speak loudly.
Our voice alone may not have as much impact as we would like, but my voice
can be heard and influential through membership in Ohio Farm Bureau.
My voice, along with tens of thousands of Ohioans,
makes a difference when it comes to legislation, regulation, or litigation that can be positive or potentially harmful to those of us in the agriculture community.
Become a member today at ohiofarmbureau.org.
Because there is strength and members.
Welcome back to the Ohio Farm Bureau podcast. I'm Ty Higgins. If you actively work to secure your family farm legacy and preserve assets in an estate plan, a key tax law change may be coming. Staying ahead of that change can help minimize the tax burden of transferring assets from one generation to the next. So what do you need to know to ensure your farm estate plan is taking full advantage of the law that's set to sunset at the end of this year? We bring into the conversation Steve Hamilton back to the podcast, Technical Director of Advanced Consulting Group with Nationwide Retirement Institute. Steve, welcome back to the podcast. Great to see you.
Thanks, Ty. Appreciate it.
So let's set the baseline first of what we're talking about with these tax laws that are sunsetting later on this year. What did the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 provide that was beneficial to farm families?
Well, Ty, it doubled the estate gift and generation skipping tax exemption from $5 to $10 million. Now, that's beneficial to farmers, ranchers, small business owners in general, just because it's removed a potential 40% tax for most of them. And that just means there's one less challenge to keeping the farming assets intact and not having to sell something to pay taxes. So obviously that's very important. And the other thing is, Ty, if I may add, the exemption amount has been adjusted each year for inflation. So this year it's $13,990,000, almost $14 million. And that's per person. So that means a married couple with properly arranged estate planning can shelter $27,980,000, which is almost $28 million from a 40% estate tax.
It's not just about saving money on taxes. This is really comes down to whether you can pass the farm along to the next generation or not. It's a big deal for agriculture.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is that this tax law change is scheduled to sunset at the end of this year, as you mentioned. And we're already into this year. I'm looking at it, it's almost Valentine's Day right now as we're recording this. We're in the middle of February. And say, well, we've still got a lot left, but there is some urgency because, for one thing, this is going to cut it in half. So we're going to be going from 14 million compared to what's $28 million a day, 7 million for an individual. And at the same time, what's happening is we see land values increasing, we see farm assets increasing. Everything seems to be going up in value. At the same time, they're going to talk about cutting this. The issue is that, unfortunately, they usually don't do anything with these tax bills until the very end of the year. So we don't know, and we probably won't know, if they keep the same track record, what's going to happen until December. So it's very hard to plan because you're not going to get in to see an attorney in December at that point in time. So what I encourage people to do, if you think you're going to have an estate tax problem because it's dropping in half, then you should be talking to your attorney right now. Start planning, start setting things up, and even get the documents in place. You don't necessarily have to have them signed, but then that way, if they don't get the things passed or it passes in some other form that is not as favorable, you've got everything in place, you can sign it. Because last time this happened, and I remember, I had people tell me they couldn't even get to see their attorney, and they started at the end of the summer, and they couldn't get in to see the attorney at that point. So this is not something that you want to wait to the last minute on.
As those conversations happen throughout the year with those attorneys, there are other strategies farmers should consider to help maximize current and future tax exemptions in their farm estate plan. I want to break them down. You mentioned a few of them, including annual gifting. What does that look like as farmers start to think about other ways to keep their money to themselves?
Yeah, there's a number of strategies out there. And Ty, we need to remember it's not a one size fits all, and every farming operation, every family is different. And we could spend hours discussing any one of these strategies or techniques. I mean, first of all, I'd say is that, wills, powers of attorneys, healthcare directives, those type of things are just the basic plans that everybody probably should be looking at and have. You mentioned gifting. And gifting is something that, well, it's my kids remind me about this about every Christmas, I think it is, that we can do we can do annual gifts of $19,000 per person per year. So if I wanted to, which sometimes my desire is there, but not exactly the economics to give $19,000 to each of my 6 kids, and I could give $19,000 to each of my 19 grandkids if I want to. And my wife can join in and do $19,000 also. So that's $30,000 per person per year that we could do. So we can move a fair amount of gifts or amount of assets of value. It doesn't have to be cash. It can be livestock. It can be grain. It could be units of an LLC that can be moved that way. And it's not reportable. It's an annual gift exclusion, but you go $1 over that, and you are going to be paying, or not paying, I shouldn't say paying, you will be reporting. You're supposed to report that dollar that you've exceeded it on a gift tax return. And anytime you do gifting that exceeds it, it needs to be reported. The government keeps track of it. Doesn't mean you're paying a tax. It just means that we're keeping track of it. And when you were to die, we take all those gifts that exceeded those annual gifts, we add them back into your estate, and then we calculate what your estate tax is. So it just stays kind of over on a ledger. And that's why gifting, not just the annual gift, but even amounts above that can be important.
You mentioned LLCs. In what ways should a farm be structured to maybe help alleviate some of these concerns?
Well, there's all kinds of business entity structures, whether we're talking S or C corporations, family limited partnerships, but limited liability companies are kind of a favorite because they're easier to get in and out of. Typically, they're set up so they're taxed like a partnership, which makes them like I say, a little bit easier to get out of. And what they can do is they can allow the parent, let's say, to be in control and managing the property, but allow them to start distributing assets, or ownership would be a proper, more correct word, ownership of those LLCs out to other members of the family. So they can start dividing ownership up, gifting that ownership out if they want to. It can also be used to help reduce liability, but they could also be used to help reduce the size of the total estate for some discounting that can be done in those situations, which is a little more sophisticated, but still can be very valuable if you're trying to get that value down.
What are charitable remainder trusts or irrevocable life insurance trusts? It seems like they sound complicated. Are we getting too far in the weeds here?
Well, let's take charitable remainder trust. And there are trusts that we call split interest type of arrangements. And what do I mean by that is that I give something away, but I've retained something back for myself. So I've really split the interest. And there's all kinds of variations on them. And one of them is a charitable remainder trust. Now, where I see that used most often, Ty, is situations where you have the farmer who's doesn't have any heirs, or maybe doesn't have anybody who wants to farm and just is going to sell out. And we know that many times that land has appreciated in value substantially since they purchased it. We know that they probably have grain in the bin with no basis on it. They have other assets that are highly depreciated. So if they have a big sale, what's going to happen? A lot of money, and that means a lot of taxes, right? What we can do with a charitable remainder trust is we can gift those assets into the trust. In return, which is going to go to a charity, ultimately it goes to a charity, that charity sells the property. But all those gains stay there until money comes out to that farmer. So the farmer then will typically get a life income off of that and only pay the tax when they receive the money. So instead of one big tax bill, they're spreading that income out over their life expectancies. And usually they're going to get a charitable deduction on some of that as well, as kind of a bonus on that. So that's one way of helping mitigate and manage their tax issue if they're retiring and getting out of the business. Irrevocable life insurance trust are one of the basic elements that's used for people that have gone beyond wills, trust, the revocable trust, which are designed primarily to avoid probate, but can be used to help maximize that exemption, the exemption equivalent that we're given. But if we want to get that life insurance, which is going to be income tax-free death benefit, we can move that over into this irrevocable trust, not only avoid income taxes, but avoid federal state taxes on it as well. And that can get over there, be in that trust. It's separate from the farmer's other assets. It's not includable in the estate as long as it's properly done, as long as they live 3 years. They need to live 3 years once they set it up. And then that money will be totally separate, but it can be used to help replace estate costs, taxes, whatever may be lost with the settling of the estate. Or in some cases, what we see, Ty, is that if we have predominantly most of the assets going to one child, because that's the child that's going to take over the farm, many times they will use that money to help offset that inheritance and give it to the other children who may not be getting the same amount of assets because they're not taking over the farm. So it's a way to kind of offset, or a way to try to be a little more fair to the other kids as well. We see it being used in that way.
You've talked a little bit about transferring assets, and that is a major part of this conversation. What other trusts are out there we may not know about to help us do that with less tax implication?
There are things that are called grantor retained annuity trust, and sometimes referred to as GRAT. Everything's got its own acronym.
I noticed that.
You can get lost in them, whether it's ILETs or GRATs or CRATs or whatever. But this is another split interest gift. And what it is if I have some assets, and usually they're assets I think are going to appreciate in value. So I know if I hold on to them, they're going to increase the size of my estate. And I don't want my estate to get any bigger, and I want, let's say, my kids to get it. But you know what? I kind of like having money off those assets as well, right? So what I can do is I can put those assets into this grantor retained annuity trust. I can get a stream of income off of it for myself, let's say for 10 years. But at the end of the 10 years, it goes to my beneficiaries. We'll say it's my kids at that point. And what I've done is I made a gift. But if it's $100,000 in there, it's not a gift of $100,000 because those kids had to wait 10 years to get it. So the value of that gift is going to be discounted down. So when I file my gift tax return, it's not going to say $100,000 on it. Maybe it says $20,000. I'm just pulling numbers out of the air, for example. But so that's what I show as my gift. That's what gets tallied up at the end when I pass away. But in reality, when I die, if things go the way we hope they went, those kids got $100,000 that appreciated in value, and I only had to use up $20,000 of my exemption to get it to them. So that's what that one is. The other one is something similar, but it's with a residence. And usually where we see this done the most is with vacation homes, where I bought a place and a nice vacation home, and I'm looking around and go, this thing's going to go up in value. I mean, it's in a hot spot. Everybody's moving here, and I think it's going to double in no time. So I do the same thing. I put it into this qualified personal residence trust, and I'm going to live there for 10 years. So I've retained the right to live there for 10 years, but after the 10 years, my beneficiaries get it. So again, we discount the value for the gift for that 10 years based on the current value, and hopefully when my kids get it, it's going to be really appreciated, but that's not in my estate. I've got it out of my estate.
As I mentioned at the onset, this is more than preserving wealth. There's also an aspect of securing the farm's future to consider here. So when we talk about resources that Nationwide has, we talk a lot about land as your legacy. Can you talk about how that works into this conversation and how our listeners and viewers can find out more about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say that obviously financial advisors, attorneys, tax professionals, among others, need to be involved in the planning process and helping develop it and making sure it actually gets implemented. And Land as Your Legacy plays into that. We have this program that's been around for a number of years. I'm sure many of your listeners have heard about it already. Hopefully they have. And what we've done is we've partnered with a select number of financial advisors to offer this program to those who are interested. And it's at no cost to them, those that use it. So those financial professionals have the support of a team of individuals like myself at Nationwide, at the actual insurance company. We're there to help support them and help put the program or the plan together. So I would just say for those that know that there's a Land as Your Legacy advisor near them, go ahead, set up an appointment, start a plan. If you haven't, if you got a plan, hey, have it looked at and reviewed. Things change. It's amazing how many plans I see that are out of date because you did it 10 years ago and you just never got around to it. If you don't have anybody that's a contact, send a request to our email address, please. And our email address, and I'll repeat this a couple of times, it's layl@nationwide.com, layl@nationwide.com. Include your name, email address, phone number, and probably just as important, maybe more important a little bit, is at least the address so we know where you're at. So we can find an advisor in your area that you can work with. So please contact us. We're here to help. That's what we do.
Always great to visit with you, Steve. Steve Hamilton is Technical Director of Advanced Consulting Group with Nationwide Retirement Institute. Great information as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate the time, and God bless.
Find previous podcasts at ohiofarmbureau.org and search podcast.